The world outside the HH-60 Pave Hawk was a churning vortex of grey sleet and violent wind. Inside, the roar of the rotors was a physical presence, a constant, bone-jarring vibration that made teeth ache and vision blur. Strapped into her seat, Captain Anya Sharma felt nothing but a profound and unnerving stillness. Her eyes were closed, not in fear, but in concentration. In her mind, she saw the numbers: wind speed, air density, rotor drift, elevation decline. She was painting a picture of their descent into the Korengal Valley, a place the pilots had grimly nicknamed the Blender. Every gust of wind that slammed against the fuselage was just another variable in an equation she was already solving. "Hey, Bookworm, you still with us?" Master Sergeant Cole Rex Mitchell's voice boomed through the internal comms, laced with the casual condescension he reserved just for her. "Or did you fall asleep reading the instruction manual for your seatbelt?" A few of the other Navy SEALs on the bird chuckled. They were from SEAL Team 5, a unit carved from granite and fueled by bravado. To them, Anya was an anomaly, a combat rescue officer who seemed more at home with charts and data than with the controlled savagery their job required. She was slight of build, with an academic intensity in her eyes that they mistook for timidity. They couldn't understand how someone who had passed the brutal CRO pipeline, a physical and mental meat grinder, could be so quiet, so analytical. So they called her Bookworm, a label that was both a dig at her intellect and a dismissal of her worth in a firefight. What none of them knew was how she'd truly survived that pipeline, or the promise she'd made that drove her through it. Anya opened her eyes. "I'm tracking our descent vector, Master Sergeant," she replied, her voice calm and even, a placid lake in the storm of their flight. "We've deviated 7 degrees off the ingress route due to the southern shear. We'll need to correct course post-haste or we'll pop out over the wrong ridgeline." Rex scoffed. "Just point us to the downed pilot, Captain. We'll handle the rest. No need to overthink it." The mission was supposed to be a straightforward extraction. An F-16 pilot had ejected over a remote stretch of the valley after mechanical failure. He was alive, his beacon was active, but the weather was closing in fast. They had a 4-hour window to get in, retrieve the pilot, and get out before the storm made flight impossible. But to Anya, nothing in this valley was ever straightforward. For weeks, she had pored over topographical maps, satellite imagery, and intelligence reports of the area. She knew its contours, its hidden passages, its ambush points, better than she knew the lines on her own hands. War, to her, wasn't just about pulling a trigger. It was a complex, 3-dimensional chess match, and she intended to see the whole board. "There," she said, pointing to a flickering display on her wrist-mounted GPS. "The data from the last drone pass is inconsistent with the topographical survey from 2 months ago." Petty Officer Diaz, the team's comm specialist, leaned over. "What do you mean, inconsistent?" "There's a new trail etched into the western face of the Sortalo SAR mountain," Anya explained, zooming in on the image. It was faint, barely a scratch on the landscape, but it was undeniably there. "It's not on any of our maps. It leads directly toward the pilot's last known position." Rex leaned in, squinting at the screen. After a moment, he grunted. "It's a goat path, Bookworm. You're spinning up over a damn goat path. This is the Korengal. People have been walking these hills for 1,000 years. Let's stick to the mission." He clapped a heavy hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be reassuring but felt dismissive. "Relax. We are the best at what we do. No goat herder is gonna get the drop on us." Anya didn't relax. A cold knot of dread was tightening in her stomach. It wasn't just a path. It was too direct, too deliberate. It was a route designed for speed, for moving men and equipment into a position of tactical advantage. Goats meandered, soldiers marched. Her mind raced, connecting this new detail to a dozen other fragments of intelligence she'd absorbed. Reports of increased enemy chatter, whispers of a high-value Taliban commander moving into the area, the recent disappearance of a local informant. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture she didn't like. They weren't flying into a simple rescue. They were flying into a trap. She felt a deep, ancestral instinct flare to life, a feeling that went beyond data and maps. It was the same feeling that had guided her grandfather through the dense jungles of Burma during World War II, a story he'd told her countless times as a child. He'd always said, "The enemy doesn't put a trail where it's easy. He puts it where you're blind." They saw a map, she saw a trap. It was a conviction so strong, it felt like a physical force. If you believe in trusting your gut over the crowd, make sure you're subscribed, because instinct is all you have when the lines on the map lie to you. "Pilot, this is Sharma," she said into her helmet MIC, her voice now edged with an urgency. That made the man in the cockpit hesitate. "I'm advising we abort this approach. We need to find an alternate insertion point on the eastern side of the valley. I believe the primary LZ is compromised." Before the pilot could respond, Rex's voice cut in, sharp and angry. "You are out of line, Captain. I am the senior enlisted on this bird, and we are not aborting based on your academic hunch. We have a pilot freezing to death on that mountain. We are going in." His words were a command, backed by the full weight of his reputation and the steely gazes of his men. In their world, decisiveness, even reckless decisiveness, was valued over cautious analysis. Anya knew she had lost. She could protest, but it would be seen as insubordination, as weakness. She fell silent, the cold knot in her stomach turning to ice. She watched the craggy, unforgiving peaks of the Kerengel rise up to meet them, the sleet turning to thick, wet snow that plastered itself against the cockpit glass. The Pave Hawk bank hard, following the original flight path. It descended below. The ridgeline, the roar of its engines echoing off the narrow canyon walls. For a moment, everything was exactly as the mission plan had predicted. They were 2 minutes from the landing zone. The tension in the cabin eased slightly. Diaz gave her a small, apologetic shrug. Even Rex seemed to relax his rigid posture, and that's when the world exploded. A streak of white fire erupted from the ridgeline to their west, the exact spot where the goat path terminated. It was a perfect, devastatingly accurate shot. The RPG struck the tail rotor with the force of a wrecking ball. The helicopter shuddered violently, a mortally wounded beast lurching in the sky. The deafening roar of the engines was replaced by the high-pitched scream of tearing metal and the frantic blare of a dozen different warning alarms. The cabin was plunged into a chaotic nightmare of strobing red lights and acrid smoke. Men who had been joking moments before were now slammed against the bulkheads. Gear flew through the air like shrapnel. Anya was thrown from her seat, her harness the only thing stopping her from being crushed against the ceiling as the Pave Hawk began to spin, completely out of control. Through the smoke, she saw Rex's face, his eyes wide with a horrifying mix of shock and dawning realization. He had been wrong. She had been right. The goat path hadn't been for goats after all. The helicopter tilted into a death spiral, the ground rushing up to meet them with impossible speed. Anya caught a final glimpse of Rex's helmeted head striking, a metal support beam with a sickening crack. Then everything went black. Pain was the first thing to pierce the darkness. A sharp, insistent throbbing in her head, followed by the coppery taste of blood in her mouth. Anya's consciousness returned in fragments, like a shattered mirror slowly reassembling itself. The first image was the frantic, blinking red of an emergency light. The first sound was the hiss of burning electronics and the low groan of twisted metal. The first smell was a toxic cocktail of jet fuel and pine. She forced her eyes open. The Pave Hawk was a mangled wreck, wedged between several massive pine trees on a steep, snow-dusted slope. The cabin was tilted at a sickening angle, a chaotic junkyard of broken equipment, ruptured supply crates, and motionless bodies. The tail section was completely gone, sheared off by the impact. By some miracle, the main fuselage hadn't exploded. The snow and wet timber must have smothered the flames. Pushing past the initial wave of shock, her training surged to the forefront. Assess, orient, act. It was the mantra of a combat rescue officer, drilled into her until it was more instinct than thought. She checked herself for injuries. A nasty gash on her forehead, bruised ribs, and a body that felt like it had been used as a punching bag, but nothing seemed to be broken. She was alive. She was functional. She unbuckled her harness and dropped to the canted floor, her boots crunching on shattered glass. "Sound off," she yelled, her voice hoarse. "Status report." A weak groan came from the front of the cabin. It was Diaz. "Here, Cap. My leg. I think it's broken." Another voice, younger, filled with panic. Petty Officer Jensen, the team's rookie. I can't feel my arm. Oh God, I can't feel my arm." Anya moved toward them, her movements deliberate and sure-footed despite the wreckage. The pilots were gone, their cockpit a crushed and silent tomb. 2 other SEALs were motionless in their seats, their positions unnatural, their stillness absolute. They were beyond help. That left her, Diaz, Jensen, and Rex. She found Rex slumped near the main door, a deep, ugly contusion swelling on the side of his head where he'd struck the beam. His breathing was shallow and ragged. A quick check revealed a compound fracture. In his left femur, the bone jutting grotesquely against the fabric of his uniform. He was alive, but he was critically injured and unconscious. The leader of the pack, the man who had dismissed her concerns with such arrogance, was now completely helpless. "Okay," Anya said, her voice cutting through the rising panic. "Listen to me. Diaz, keep pressure on any bleeding. Jensen, breathe. Just breathe. I'm coming to you." She grabbed the nearest medical kit, its contents miraculously intact. For the next hour, Anya became a whirlwind of focused, efficient action. She set Diaz's leg with a splint fashioned from a rifle and medical tape. She diagnosed Jensen's injury, not a severed limb, but a brachial plexus injury from the violent impact, a nerve issue that had caused temporary paralysis. She administered a shot of morphine to both men, her hand steady, her voice a constant, calming presence. "You're going to be okay, Jensen," she murmured, wrapping his arm securely. "The feeling will come back. You just need to stay warm. And stay calm." The young SEAL, who had been on the verge of hysteria, quieted under her confident care, his fearful eyes trusting her completely. Her final patient was Rex. Stabilizing his leg was a grim, painful task. She had to cut away his pant leg and apply a traction splint to align the bone and stop him from bleeding out internally. All the while, she worked with a detached professionalism that belied the chaos around them. The men who had called her bookworm were now utterly dependent on her knowledge. The irony was a bitter pill, but she had no time for it. With the immediate medical crises handled, Anya shifted her focus to their tactical situation. They were stranded, deep in hostile territory, with no communications and a storm raging. They hadn't just crashed, they had been shot down. The enemy knew they were here. And they would be coming. She salvaged what she could: 2 M4 rifles with limited ammunition, a sidearm, the half-destroyed radio, a few flares, and a survival pack containing water purification tablets and emergency rations. It wasn't much. "Diaz, can you fight?" Anya asked, handing him a rifle. The SEAL gritted his teeth, his face pale with pain. He propped himself against a bulkhead, his splintered leg stretched out awkwardly. "Give me a good field of fire, Captain. I can lay down hate with the best of 'em." Anya nodded, a flicker of respect for the man's grit. She helped him get into a position covering the main approach to the crash site. Then she turned her attention to the radio. It was their only hope. The casing was cracked and the power source was dead, but the internal components looked salvageable. She began the painstaking work of trying to jury-rig a new power connection. Using batteries from their helmet-mounted night vision goggles today as she worked, a new, chilling thought began to form. The RPG shot had been too perfect. The enemy hadn't just gotten lucky. They had known their approach vector, their altitude, their timing. Rex had dismissed her concerns about the go path, but now it was clear, it wasn't just a trail, it was a kill box, designed and executed with military precision. This wasn't a band of disorganized insurgents. This was something far more dangerous. She had to know for sure. "Diaz, I'm going to do a quick recon of the perimeter. Keep your eyes open. Shoot anything that isn't me." "Roger that, Cap," he said, his voice tight. Anya slipped out of the wreckage and into the ghostly twilight of the snow-filled forest. The wind howled through the pines, a mournful, lonely sound. She moved with a silent grace that would have stunned her teammates, using the trees and shadows for cover. She circled the crash site in an ever-widening spiral, her sensors on high alert. About 100 yards up the slope, she found it. A small, hastily abandoned fighting position dug into the snow. It was littered with fresh brass casings from a Dragunov sniper rifle and, lying half-buried in the snow, the spent tube of an RPG-7. And next to it, something else. A high-tech satellite phone, a model she recognized as being used by elite special forces, not local militia. It was open, a recent call log visible on its screen. The call had been made just minutes before their helicopter was hit. Her blood ran cold. The ambush wasn't just well planned. It was being coordinated in real time by a sophisticated command element. This discovery changed everything. They weren't just random survivors waiting for rescue. They were witnesses who had stumbled into the middle of a major, clandestine enemy operation. Now, getting out wasn't just about survival. It was about delivering critical intelligence. Anya grabbed the sat phone and sprinted back toward the helicopter, a new and terrible urgency propelling her. When she got back, she found Diaz with his rifle trained on the opposite ridge. "We've got company, Captain," he whispered, his voice grim. "3 of them. Maybe more. Moving fast." In the face of overwhelming odds, some people see an end. Anya Sharma saw a new beginning, a problem to be solved. She looked at the wounded men relying on her, the useless radio in her hands, and the enemy closing in. This was no longer a rescue mission. It was a battle for survival, and she was in command. If you're the kind of person who never quits, hit that like button to show you're still in this fight with her. She slid back into the wreckage, her mind a whirlwind of calculations. They couldn't stay here. They were sitting ducks. They had to move, but with 2 critically wounded men, it was impossible. Their only chance was the radio. It had to work. She worked with frantic intensity now, stripping wires with her teeth, her fingers numb from the cold. Jensen watched her, his one good eye wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Are they going to find us?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," Anya said without looking up, her tone flat and certain. "But we are not going to make it easy for them." She finally managed to connect the makeshift battery pack to the radio's mainboard. She flipped the power switch. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a faint crackle of static filled the silent cabin, a fragile whisper of hope in the heart of the storm. It was a weak signal, barely alive, but it was there. Just then, the first bullet slammed into the fuselage next to her head, the sharp ping of impact making her flinch. It was followed by a volley of automatic rifle fire, tearing through the thin aluminum skin of the helicopter like paper. The enemy was here. They were organized, they were aggressive, and they were trying to pin them down for the kill. Anya grabbed the radio handset, shielding it with her body, as the world outside erupted in a storm of gunfire. The inside of the PAVE Hawk became a death trap. Bullets ripped through the fuselage, shredding metal and ricocheting through the cabin with vicious, whining sounds. The air, already thick with the smell of fuel, was now filled with the cordite sting of gunpowder. Anya flattened herself against the floor, clutching the radio handset to her ear as if it were a holy relic. The faint crackle of static was the only thing that mattered in a world that had shrunk to this one desperate moment. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," she spoke into the MIC, her voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around her. This is Victor 26. We are down in the Korengal Valley. I repeat, helicopter down. Multiple casualties. We are under heavy fire. Request immediate assistance." Outside, Diaz was returning fire, the deep, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of his M for a defiant roar against the enemy's chattering AK-47s. "They're trying to flank us from the east, Cap." He yelled over the din, his words punctuated by the sharp crack of a round impacting the metal near his head. "Got at least 6 of them." Anya's mind worked at lightning speed. She could hear the different cadences of the enemy weapons, could pinpoint their locations based on sound. While her hands worked the radio, her mind was drawing a tactical map of the battlefield. "Jensen," she shouted, "your sidearm. Cover the west door. Fire 2-round bursts at the large rock formation. Make them think we are stronger than we are." The young SEAL, still struggling with the shock and the partial paralysis in his arm, fumbled for his pistol with his good hand. Seeing his hesitation, Anya crawled over to him, never taking the radio from her ear. She looked him directly in the eye, her gaze cutting through his fear. "You are a United States Navy SEAL. You are not going to die here. Now, fight." Her words were like a splash of ice water. Jensen's jaw tightened. He nodded, propped himself up, and began firing methodical, controlled bursts, his fear replaced by a cold, newfound purpose. A tinny voice finally answered through the static on the radio. "Unidentified station. You are on a restricted channel. Identify yourself. What is your authentication code?" The voice was young, bored, and bureaucratic. A staff sergeant sitting in a warm, safe command center 100 miles away at Bagram Air Base. "We don't have authentication. Our bird is down." Anya yelled back, frustration flaring. "Listen to me. We have critically wounded personnel." The call sign was Whiplash 7, part of a rescue op for Victor 26. I don't have a Whiplash 7 on my flight log. For this sector, the voice replied, maddeningly calm. I can't authorize assets without proper verification. This could be an enemy deception. Anya wanted to scream. They were dying, and this Clark was worried about paperwork. She saw the flash of an RPG from the trees. RPG, she screamed. Diaz saw it too and ducked just as the warhead slammed into the ground 10 feet from his position, showering the wreckage with dirt and shrapnel. Time was up. The standard protocols had failed. She had to try something else, something drastic. Her mind raced through the thousands of pages of regulations and procedures she had memorized, searching for loophole. A forgotten key. And then she found it. An obscure emergency protocol, a variation of a broken arrow distress call, used so rarely it was almost a myth. It was a high-risk gamble. If the person on the other end didn't recognize it, they'd assume she was insane. Or, worse, a highly sophisticated enemy ruse. Taking a deep breath, she keyed the MIC again, her voice changing. The pleading tone was gone, replaced by one of ice-cold, precise authority. Firefly, 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 she said, using the archaic code word for a catastrophic ground force event. I am declaring a protocol Nightingale sword. I repeat, Nightingale sword. Grid coordinates are 39 Sierra, Echo Juliet, 1774, 90312. Authorization is Sharma, Captain, 779 to Delta. Fire. Mission requested. Danger close. Shelley, bring the sky down on these coordinates, now. In the cavernous, climate-controlled command center at Bagram, Colonel Marcus Thorne was on his way to get a cup of coffee when he heard the transmission over a side speaker. He stopped dead. Nightingale sword. He hadn't heard that protocol since a disastrous mission in Somalia nearly 20 years ago. It was a commander's ultimate distress call, a signal that a unit was about to be completely overrun and was authorizing artillery strikes on its own position as a final act of defiance. It was a ghost protocol, not even taught to most comms officers anymore. He shoved the young staff sergeant out of his chair without a word. Who is this? He barked into the MIC, son. You better not be playing games. This is Captain Anya Sharma, sir. Anya's voice crackled back, strained but clear. I have 2 critically wounded SEALs and 2 KIA. We are surrounded and taking effective fire from a platoon-sized element. I need that fire mission or we are all dead in the next 5 minutes. Thorne didn't hesitate. He knew. You couldn't fake the sound of desperation and competence fused together like that. Artillery, this is command. He snapped to the fire direction center. I have a Nightingale priority mission. You heard the lady. Make it rain. Back in the wreckage, a new sound began to build in the distance, a low, guttural tearing of the air, like the sky itself was being ripped in half. It was the sound of salvation. The first 155mm high explosive shells screamed overhead and impacted on the ridge with a series of earth-shattering explosions. Trees were vaporized. The ground bucked like a living thing. The enemy firing ceased instantly, replaced by panic screams. In the sudden, ringing silence, Rex stirred. His eyes flooded open, hazy with pain and confusion. He saw Anya, her face smeared with dirt and blood, still clutching the radio. He saw the devastation the artillery had wrought outside. He tried to push himself up, to take command, the instinct of a lifetime kicking in. What's happening? He slurred. Stay down, Master Sergeant, Anya said gently, already moving to check his splint. I'm getting us out of here. He watched her, his drug-addled mind struggling to process the scene. The woman he dismissed as a liability, a bookworm, had just single-handedly saved them from certain death by calling down the wrath of God. A flicker of something, disbelief, grudging respect, shame, crossed his face before his eyes rolled back and he lapsed into unconsciousness again. They tried to silence her voice, but it was the only thing standing between her team and annihilation. Anya knew this was just a temporary reprieve. The shelling would stop, and the enemy would regroup. If you believe one voice can change everything, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. This fight isn't over, the radio crackled again. It was Colonel Thorne. His voice was grim. Captain Sharma, listen to me carefully. That artillery bought you a window. Use it. We've analyzed the enemy chatter you mentioned and cross-referenced it with the position of that sat phone you found. This is bigger than we thought. They have man-pads, man-portable air defense systems, in that valley. That's why they were so confident. They were waiting to shoot down our rescue birds too. Anya's heart sank. No helicopters. No easy way out. The shelling will keep them busy for about 30 minutes, the colonel continued, his voice heavy with the weight of the order he was about to give. We can't send air support. It's a suicide run. There's a potential extraction point, a dry riverbed designated LZ Vulture, 9 miles over the eastern ridge. It's your only chance. You have to get your team there on foot. I'm sorry, Captain. You're on your own until then. 9 miles. Over a mountain. In a blizzard. With 2 men who couldn't walk. As the last of his words faded, the next wave of artillery shells screamed in, impacting even closer this time, their thunderous arrival a stark and terrifying reminder of the impossible task that lay ahead. The world outside was a hellscape of fire and snow. The artillery barrage had turned the serene forest into a splintered, smoking ruin. The air was thick with the smell of burnt pine and churned earth. For Anya Sharma and the broken remnants of her team, it was the smell of a chance, a sliver of hope carved out by high explosives. But it was a small chance, and it was closing fast. We move now. Anya's voice cut through the ringing in their ears. Diaz, Jensen, grab what you can carry. Ammunition, water, medical supplies. Nothing else. We travel light, we travel fast. Diaz, his face a mask of pained determination, dragged himself toward the supply packs. What about them, Cap? He asked, nodding toward Rex and the other wounded SEAL, a young petty officer named Corrigan who had taken shrapnel to his back and legs. We carry them, Anya said, her tone leaving no room for argument. It was a statement of fact, not a suggestion. The 2 able-bodied SEALs, Diaz and Jensen, looked at her, then at the 2 deadweight bodies. Diaz himself could barely stand. Jensen had the use of only 1 arm. Rex alone weighed over 200 and 20 pounds in his gear. Corrigan was nearly as big. The math was brutal. Impossible, we can't, Jensen said, his voice cracking. We'll never make it. Not 9 miles. Anya walked over to him and put a hand on his good shoulder. Look at me, Jensen. We are not leaving them behind. That is not who we are. We will carry them, or we will die here with them. There is no other choice. Her gaze was a force of nature, an anchor in the swirling chaos of his fear. He saw no doubt in her eyes, only an unbreakable resolve. He swallowed hard and nodded. They fashioned 2 makeshift stretchers out of Pave Hawk floor panels and parachute rigging. It was a crude, clumsy solution. Getting Rex and Corrigan onto them was a grueling task that left them panting in the thin, cold air. The barrage was already starting to slacken. Their window was closing. They set off into the blizzard, a tiny, wounded procession against a vast and hostile wilderness. Diaz and Jensen took the front of Rex's stretcher, their movements hobbled. And slow. Anya, despite her smaller stature, took the rear of Corrigan's stretcher, sharing the load with another SEAL, a man named Wallace who had miraculously escaped with only minor injuries. The weight was immense. Every step was a battle, the stretcher digging into her shoulders, her muscles screaming in protest. The terrain was a nightmare. They clawed their way up steep, snow-choked inclines, their boots slipping on ice-covered rocks. They navigated through dense thickets of thorny bushes that tore at their clothes and skin. With every agonizing step, Anya's mind was working, calculating, navigating. She was their compass, their guide, her encyclopedic knowledge of the terrain, the only thing keeping them from walking in circles. She pushed them relentlessly, her voice a constant presence, urging them on, refusing to let them succumb to the exhaustion that was gnawing at their bones. Hours bled into one another. The world became a monotonous cycle of pain and effort. Lift. Step. Breathe. Lift. Step. Breathe. The snow fell harder, erasing their tracks almost as soon as they made them. A small blessing that made them feel even more isolated, more alone. They were ghosts in a white wasteland, hunted by phantoms they could no longer see but could always feel. They found a shallow cave carved into a rock face, barely large enough to shelter them from the biting wind. They collapsed inside, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. Anya immediately began checking on the wounded, changing their dressings, forcing them to drink water. Wallace, the other able-bodied SEAL, was scouting the area around the cave mouth when he suddenly froze. "Captain," he hissed, "you need to see this." Anya joined him. The cave was deeper than she'd thought. At the back, hidden behind a loose pile of rocks, was a wooden crate. And another. And another. They were stamped with military markings, but not American ones. They were Russian. Prying one open, they found it packed with brand new AK-74s and ammunition. But it was the contents of the second crate that made Anya's breath catch in her. Throat inside, nestled in foam cutouts, were 3 American-made Stinger missiles. The latest generation. They were the manpads Colonel Thorne had warned her about. Her mind reeled. How did a Taliban splinter group get their hands on top-of-the-line, US-manufactured anti-aircraft missiles? This wasn't a simple case of battlefield salvage. This was evidence of a major intelligence breach, a betrayal at a level she couldn't even begin to comprehend. Someone had armed these insurgents to the teeth. Her team hadn't just been ambushed, they had been targeted by an enemy with sophisticated, inside help. Their survival was now secondary to getting this intelligence back. They were carrying more than just their brothers now. They were carrying a truth that could shake the foundations of the entire war effort. Suddenly, a voice echoed from outside the cave, a sharp command in Pashto. A patrol. They had been found. Anya's reaction was instantaneous. She put a finger to her lips, signaling for silence. She drew her combat knife and her suppressed pistol. There were 3 of them, their silhouettes visible against the snow. They were moving casually, not yet aware of the cave's occupants. Wallace, on my signal, you take the one on the right, she whispered. Diaz, Jensen, be ready to fire. But only if they get past us. She didn't wait for an acknowledgement. She moved like a phantom, melting into the shadows at the cave's entrance. The lead fighter stepped past her, peering into the darkness. In one fluid, silent motion, Anya struck. She clamped a hand over his mouth, stifling his cry, and drove her knife into the soft spot beneath his jaw. The kill was brutal, efficient, and utterly silent. At the same moment, Wallace dispatched his target. The third man, hearing the soft thud of his comrades falling, turned, his eyes widening in alarm. Before he could raise his rifle, 2 rounds from Anya's pistol hit him square in the chest. He collapsed without a sound. The violence was over in less than 5 seconds. Anya stood over the body, her breathing steady, her expression unreadable. The knife in her hand dripped crimson onto the pure white snow. The remaining SEALs stared at her, a new understanding dawning in their eyes. The quiet, analytical bookworm was gone. In her place stood a warrior as cold and as deadly as the mountain itself. They carried their brothers, and she carried the burden of command. If you believe in never leaving anyone behind, tap that share button and pass this story on. They had to move, now. The missed check-in from the patrol would bring the rest of the enemy force down on them. They took the dead men's weapons and ammunition and resumed their agonizing trek. The weight felt heavier now, burdened by the ghosts of the men they had just killed. They pushed on for what felt like an eternity, driven by Anya's relentless will. Finally, through the swirling snow, she saw it, the ridgeline that marked the final approach to LZ Vulture. Hope, fragile and thin, flickered within her. They were only 3 miles away. They were going to make it. They were halfway up the final slope, their bodies screaming, their minds numb with fatigue, when the sharp, distinct crack of a high-velocity rifle shot echoed through the valley. It was a sound that cut through the wind and the snow and the pain. It was the sound of a skilled marksman, patient and perfectly positioned. Petty Officer Corrigan, the young SEAL on the stretcher Anya was helping to carry, cried out, a sharp, choked gasp. A dark red stain blossomed on his chest, spreading rapidly. Across his uniform. Anya's head snapped up, her eyes scanning the opposite ridge. She saw it for just a fraction of a second, the glint of sunlight off a high-powered scope. A sniper. He had been waiting for them, tracking them, letting them exhaust themselves before picking them off one by one in this open killing field. Before she could even scream a warning, a second shot rang out. A white-hot, searing pain erupted in her right thigh. Her leg buckled beneath her, and she went down hard in the snow, the stretcher clattering to the ground beside her. The world tilted into a nauseating sea of white snow and red pain. For a heartbeat, the sniper's bullet had stolen her breath, her strength, her command. But only for a heartbeat. The fire that erupted in her thigh was an inferno, yet a colder, more powerful force rose to meet it, duty. Through the haze of agony, she saw Corrigan, gasping for air, the red stain on his chest growing with every frantic pulse. Corrigan. The name was a choked cry torn from her throat. She ignored the fire in her own leg and began crawling through the deep snow toward him, dragging her wounded limb behind her. The sniper had them zeroed. Every movement was a death sentence, yet she moved. "Stay down, Captain." Diaz screamed from behind a rock outcropping 20 yards away. "He's got us pinned. We're in the kill box." Anya reached Corrigan, her medkit already in hand. She ripped open his body armor, her fingers, slick with her own blood, fumbling with the clasps. The bullet had entered high on his chest, a sucking chest wound. He was drowning in his own blood. She worked frantically, pulling out a chest seal, and pressing it over the wound with a grunt of effort from his stretcher. Rex, now lucid and grimly aware of their predicament, began barking orders. "Wallace, Diaz, lay down suppressive fire on that ridge. 2 o'clock. Bounding overwatch. We need to. Negative." Anya's voice cut through his command, sharp and absolute. "Suppressive fire is useless. He's dug in, and his got the range on us. We fire, he waits, he shoots. We'll be out of ammo in 5 minutes, and we'll still be here." She looked around, her tactical mind overriding the pain. The sniper's position was perfect. He had a clear line of sight to their entire team, scattered and exposed on the open slope. But his perfection was his weakness. He could only see them. 50 yards to their left, a deep, narrow ravine cut into the mountainside, a scar of shadow, and rock that would be invisible from the sniper's angle. It was their only chance of cover, the ravine, she yelled, pointing with a bloody hand. "We have to get to the ravine. We'll never make it." Jensen cried out, his face ashen. "He'll pick us off before we go 10 feet. "He will if we all run at once," Anya countered, her plan forming in the crucible of desperation. "But not if he's distracted. Not if he's focused on a single target." She looked from Jensen to Diaz to Wallace. They understood what she was suggesting before she said it. "No, Captain," Wallace said, his voice firm. "We won't let you." "You don't have a choice," Anya snapped. "I'm still in command of this fiasco. You will move the wounded to that ravine on my signal. That is an order." Before they could argue further, she took a deep breath, grit her teeth against the searing pain in her leg, and pushed herself to her feet. She broke cover, stumbling into the open. "Hey!" She screamed toward the distant ridge, a defiant, suicidal roar. "Over here, you son of a bitch." The sniper obliged. The crack of his rifle was instantaneous. A fist of pure force slammed into her left shoulder, spinning her around like a top. The M4 was ripped from her grasp. The pain was blinding, a white-hot nova that threatened to swallow her whole. But she didn't fall. She staggered, caught her balance, and forced her legs to keep moving, a lurching, painful run parallel to her team. "Move. Now!" she screamed at them. Galvanized by her sacrifice, the SEALs sprang into action. Diaz and Wallace grabbed Rex's stretcher. Jensen, with his one good arm, helped to daze Corrigan. They scrambled toward the ravine, slipping and sliding in the snow. Using her lone, staggering figure as their shield, Anya kept moving, a human target drawing the sniper's full attention. A third bullet came, ripping through the soft tissue of her side, just below her body armor. It felt like a hot poker being driven through her ribs. She stumbled again, her vision starting to swim with black spots. She could feel the warm, sticky flow of blood soaking her uniform from 3 different wounds. She was almost to the edge of the ravine herself when a 4th bullet hit. It didn't penetrate, but it struck her helmet with a deafening crack, grazing her scalp and sending a spiderweb of fractures across the composite material. The impact was concussive. The world went silent for a moment, replaced by a high-pitched ringing. She collapsed, falling face-first into the snow, her body finally giving out. She had bought them the time they needed. They were in the ravine. They were safe. She lay there, on the edge of darkness, listening to the enemy's bullets, kicking up snow just inches from her head. "They think I'm broken," she thought, a strange, feral clarity cutting through the pain. "But this is when I'm most dangerous. This is when the rules no longer apply." If you've ever been knocked down only to get back up stronger, hit that notification bell, because you will want to see what happens when a cornered warrior decides to bite back. Her hand, trembling, reached for the radio on her vest. She could feel her life draining out of her, pooling in the snow beneath her. She had gotten the team to cover, but she was still exposed, bleeding out, and the sniper was still up there, waiting patiently. They were still trapped. She keyed the MIC, her voice a ragged whisper. The handset was slick with her blood. Bagram, this is Valkyrie 1. She didn't know where the call sign came from. It just felt right. A name for a warrior who shepherds the dead. The radio crackled. It was the colonel's voice, tight with tension. Valkyrie 1, I read you. What is your status? We have your extraction birds on a 5-minute hold, but they are taking ground fire. The window is closing. I repeat, the window is closing. Anya looked at her own grievous wounds. She looked at the SEALs huddled in the ravine, their faces turned to her in horror and awe. They were alive, but they were trapped. The birds couldn't land while that sniper was active. Her mind, a beautiful and terrible instrument, made one final, desperate calculation. There was only one move left on the board. She keyed the MIC again, her voice shockingly clear, devoid of pain or fear, imbued with the serene authority of a queen sacrificing herself for the win. Stand by, Bagram, she whispered, pulling a small, laminated artillery chart from her pouch with her one good hand. I'm calling in my own fire. The world for Anya Sharma had shrunk to a few square inches of laminated paper. Her own blood dripped onto the chart, smearing the grid lines, but it didn't matter. She knew the numbers by heart. Her vision was a pinhole of blurry light, edges darkening rapidly, but she could still see the terrain in her mind's eye with perfect, crystalline clarity. The sniper's nest. The ravine. The razor-thin margin between them, with her one good hand, her fingers trembling not from fear, but from massive blood loss. She keyed the radio. Bagram, this is Valkyrie 1. Fire mission. I repeat, fire mission. Priority, danger close. In the ravine, Rex, now propped up against the rock wall, heard her words and his eyes went wide with terror. No, Captain. Don't do it. You'll kill us all. Abort, he roared, his voice hoarse. Anya ignored him. She was in a different place now, a serene, mathematical world beyond pain and fear. Grid, 39 Sierra, Echo Juliet, 1802, 9345. She recited, her voice a ghostly calm. Single shell, fuse delay. Fire for effect. On my command. There was a moment of stunned silence from the other end. The coordinates she had given were less than 75 meters from her own position. It was a suicide call. Any error. In the gun's calibration, any slight shift in wind, and the shell would land directly on top of them. Valkyrie 1, Colonel Thorne's voice came back, strained and heavy. Confirm danger close. Margin is negative, Captain. The sniper has our extraction zone locked down, Colonel, Anya whispered back. The birds can't land. This is the only way. I am confirming danger close. Send it. Another pause, this one lasting an eternity. Then, Thorne's voice, filled with a terrible resignation. Shot out, Valkyrie. Godspeed. Anya let the handset fall from her fingers. Incoming, she breathed, curling herself into as small a ball as her wounds would allow. The SEALs in the ravine braced themselves, their faces a mixture of terror and disbelief. The shell didn't scream. At that range, there wasn't time. There was only a sudden, violent tearing of the air, followed by a cataclysmic explosion that felt like the mountain itself was being ripped apart. The ground heaved, throwing rocks and debris into the air. The concussion wave hit them like a physical blow, stealing the air from their lungs. For a moment, Anya thought Rex had been right. She had miscalculated. She had killed them all. Then, silence. A profound, ringing silence, broken only by the soft hiss of falling snow. The sniper was gone. The ridge where he had nested was now a smoking, blackened crater. The path was clear, but the cost had been immense. Anya lay motionless, a broken doll in the snow. Her last gambit had taken the last of her strength. Darkness was closing in, a comforting, warm blanket. She's not breathing. Wallace yelled, scrambling out of the ravine toward her. He rolled her over. Her face was chalk white, her lips blue. Her uniform was soaked in a horrifying amount of blood. He pressed his fingers to her neck. Nothing, just then, the thumping sound of rotor blades filled the valley. 2 HH-60 Pave Hawks. appeared through the snow, descending rapidly toward the now secure landing zone. They touched down in a whirlwind of snow and road awash. Medics, PJs, and security teams spilled out as they loaded the wounded. Wallace and Diaz refused to leave Anya's side, performing CPR with desperate, rhythmic compressions. "Come on, Captain, stay with us." Diaz pleaded, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Don't you quit on us now." They got her onto the helicopter, a flight medic immediately taking over, injecting adrenaline directly into her heart. On the flight back, the cabin was a chaotic but controlled scene of medical urgency. Rex, strapped to a stretcher, fully conscious, now watched as they fought to save the woman he had so carelessly misjudged. He saw the 4 distinct, grievous wounds. He saw the blood-soaked charts still clutched in her hand. He saw the quiet strength that had refused to break even when her body had been shattered. He looked at the grim-faced Colonel Thorne, who had commandeered the lead bird himself to oversee the extraction. "Colonel," Rex said, his voice raspy, but clear. "They told me her call sign was Bookworm." Thorne looked at Anya still, pale form, then back at Rex. "Son," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely showed. "Call signs are earned." Hers was Valkyrie. As if summoned by the name, the flight medic suddenly shouted, "I've got a pulse. We've got a pulse. It's weak, but it's there." A wave of relief so powerful it was dizzying swept through the cabin. Months later, the sun shone brightly on the parade ground at Bagram Air Base. Captain Anya Sharma stood tall, her uniform immaculate, the scars on her body hidden but not forgotten. She walked with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of the price of survival. Before her stood the entire command, including a visiting 4-star general. The general pinned the Air Force Cross, the service's second highest award for valor, to her chest. "Captain Sharma," he said, his voice booming across the silent formation, "in the face of overwhelming odds, you demonstrated a level of courage, leadership, and sacrifice that goes above and beyond the call of duty. You are a credit to the uniform and an inspiration to us all." As the formation was dismissed, Rex Mitchell, now walking with the aid of a cane, made his way through the crowd toward her. Diaz, Jensen, Wallace, and Corrigan, all recovered, were with him. They stopped in front of her. There were no words. There didn't need to be. Rex looked her in the eye, the arrogance and condescension long since burned away, replaced by a profound and humbling respect. He raised his hand to his brow and gave her a slow, perfect salute. One by one, the other SEALs did the same. It wasn't the salute of a subordinate to an officer. It was the salute of a warrior to a warrior, of a survivor to a savior. Anya felt a single tear trace a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or pain. It was a tear of vindication. She returned the salute, her gaze steady, her spirit unbroken. The girl they called Bookworm was gone forever. In her place stood Valkyrie 1, a name that would be whispered. With reverence in the war-torn mountains of Afghanistan, a legend forged in blood, courage, and the unbreakable will of a woman who refused to be underestimated.